Welcome everyone to Overcome Podcast. Today we have a very interesting episode. I'm gonna tell a little bit of background before I talk to my guest. I was watching some of the reels on Instagram and then I saw this underwater training, and a lot of people were commenting on this. I was very impressive by the type of training. I never seen this type of training in the pool with weights and everything. I just saw that in movies probably, so I was interested. Then I found this guy that owns this gym in Houston, Texas. So welcome, Diego Jaime.
Hey, thank you, Yuri. Thank you for having me.
Well, before I even talk about the gym, I did some research about you, and there is a lot more to cover than I thought. So let's go a little bit before Deep End Fitness and talk a little bit more about your military background and how you got to the gym business.
Yeah, of course, man. So my name is Diego. I was in the Navy for about 9.5 years. I got medically retired and at like around 2020. So I like the height or the start of the pandemic at the time. And I was a hospital corpsman, just deploying with different theaters, you know what I mean, and different groups in the military. So I deployed initially with the Grunts, with 1st Battalion, 6th Marines. And then I started doing some deployments. I screened for 2nd Recon over in Camp Lejeune, got in, and I was luckily blessed with being able to deploy as kind of like a translator, team medic, stuff like that, down to South America. So for some other type of mission,
Hmm.
deployment that was needed down there.
And then when you came back and you left the military, did you immediately went through this business of gym, or there was some sort of transition until you got there?
Man, it's one of the, and I'm sure you can probably attest to something like this, and everybody who's listening or watching can kind of come up with a similar story. I'm fairly sure, and especially if you're a veteran, but it was almost like a culmination. For some reason, I just wanted to do more. It wasn't because of money, because I was still in the military when I had my first entrepreneurial venture. It was more of just, I don't know, maybe even boredom. I'm not sure. I don't want to lie to you. But I came across this video by Ty Lopez, and he was in his garage with like the Lamborghinis and the books in the back, right? And I was automatically enticed. I went into it. It was a social media marketing company, I guess. So you can make your own LLC and you could be like a marketing agency. And so I initially did that. So I was running around with a camera with different businesses down where I was stationed. And luckily, I was blessed to meet a lot of people, get a lot of experience with marketing, and kind of go from there. So that skill set, how to market a company, how to create videos, how to create content, kind of culminated together. And just because of the pandemic, I had to stop. So the business kind of just went to the wayside, right?
Hmm.
And then I started getting medically retired, so that definitely stopped. I had no time to really put my focus into it. And again, but it was that skill set was always in the back. And then out of nowhere, man, just the pandemic happened. I got out. Everything was just crazy. I didn't have anybody to talk to as far as like, hey, mentor. Whenever you got out during world pandemic, what did you do? What programs are there to help out? And so a lot of things went on the wayside, but I had always had Deep End Fitness in the back of my mind. Because of the social media and then the reconnaissance community, we did a lot of the things with like the underwater torpedo league. But at the time, it wasn't anything like you see now, like super fancy. Like back then, it was just grabbing hula hoops, tying 550 cord on like a 10-pound brick, sinking it down to like 15 feet. I think it was like pretty deep down there, and just building water confidence, for ourselves. So that was the main thing. A little bit of some slight hazing, not too much, but it was just to develop that water confidence. And I knew that in the back of my mind, that's what I wanted to do. I just had to find at the right time. At the time, they weren't expanding; they were just starting, kind of sponsoring some athletes here and there. And then the beginning of this year came around. I mean, I was trying for the past 2 years, I want to say, to bring this to Houston. talking to the founders of Deep End Fitness, Don and Prime. And man, finally was able to get in contact with my business partner now, who's Lauren Murphy. She's one of the top 10, I think, flyweights in the UFC. And so luckily I train jiu-jitsu. She obviously fights and trains jiu-jitsu. And we just kind of came together one day out of a conversation with the co-founders, Don and Prime, like, hey, there's somebody else that's interested. Do you want to partner up, or are you going to be like competitors? It's up to whatever you guys want to do. And so luckily we came together. She has a huge following and a massive influence with the fight and some veteran community. And of course, I've just done all the water stuff before, so it just made sense. And then that's when that marketing aspect came back and really came into play. So I'm pretty sure whoever, listening, watching can kind of like, yeah, I remember back in the day I had something that I did, and out of nowhere it just came back up, whether it's like on my resume or for a job or for work or for, some sort of like pleasure activity that you're doing. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and absolutely. And actually, if you think about, we can even go way back then, because I was reading an interview with you that you mentioned the 7 Habits to High Effective People, that
Yeah.
the book that you read. So that book was, and you said that you read when you were a teenager. So probably you still using some of the lessons from that book.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Yeah. That book really, I mean, obviously I've got a good amount of books, but I was always one of those weird kids that just, I loved social dynamics as a kid, and just learning about people and social groups and individuals and what makes us do what we do.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was one of the big books that opened my eyes, like, oh, okay, like begin with the end in mind. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Now, I was reading also a little bit more about the deep end fitness strategy because it looks cool, but I was trying to
correct.
understand more about the benefits. And one of the things that caught my attention was what they call the optimizing mental performance with the free operating system.
Yep.
So, can you talk a little bit more about what is this free operating system?
Yeah. So I mean, Deep End Fitness, we have a lot of operating systems. Primarily, free is used whenever we're going out and we're like teaching our session. It's usually for our beginners, that we try to utilize. At Houston, we still utilize it, but we go more towards utilizing the Deep End Fitness screener to kind of teach people like kind of what we're looking for, how to be safe and effective. And it's just different mechanisms that our founders put into place for us to kind of teach and be able to like bring things together and like, hey, all right, cool, like they can understand in water safety and how to survive. And then there's another mechanism that's more for, hey, this is for our athletes to use for active recovery and being able to put those benefits into use, right? So I mean, you spoke about like benefits, and one of the biggest ones that I come back to all the time is just the stress inoculation. Like back in the day with with my military background, especially with the reconnaissance guys, it was stress inoculation left and right. And if you weren't able to kind of like meet that stressor or stay with that stress level, and if you freaked out during like the SOCOM screener or wherever else, then it can really kind of like come and bite you in the butt, either mentally or later on in life, right? So that's what we do at Deep End Fitness, at least Houston for sure, and I know everywhere else in the United States, that's what we're doing. It's a kind of like an affiliate,
Hmm.
licensee, kind of like the CrossFit model in a way. And so we just use that to be able to like establish a way for people to be sitting with that stress level and not freak out. So we engineer that stress in Houston and everywhere else in the country. So that's one of the main things that we utilize is just engineer that stress in a nice, calm, safe environment, and be able to move people through with water confidence, and then fitness, obviously, and everything that comes into play, CO2 tolerance.
Yeah, and just to clarify for people that are listening, when I say free, is an acronym for focus, relaxation, economy of motion, and efficient breathing.
Correct.
So
Yep.
one of the things that you said about freaking out, actually, it reminds me a lot of jujitsu. As a practitioner myself, one of the premises of jiu-jitsu is be comfortable in uncomfortable positions, right? So I think it's the same thing. You are kind of uncomfortable underwater, and you want to make people comfortable and do not freak out.
Yep. Yeah, and it's the same thing as having like a 300-pound guy on top of you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, just pressure passing you, and you're like me. I'm like 155, so it's a bad time. But if you have the ability to stay calm and find those little pockets, like I'm sure you know, and everybody else who practices, you can manage an escape or maybe sneak in a wedge and kind of like start your escape process. And it's the same thing with water. I mean, water's the biggest and the greatest equalizer I think out there, and you can't escape it. You're there, and you're either literally going to sink or swim. Now, in our sessions, we won't let that happen, right?
Hmm.
We're very safe. We have in water safeties. Our head instructor's always out in the pool deck, and we have a buddy system in place, so everybody's buddy. So none of that, happens. But yeah, definitely, that's one of the methods we love to kind of stick with is keeping that level of safety and going from there.
Now, I'm curious to see how beginners they handle, and probably a lot of people when they see the footage, they may be like, "Oh, this is not for me. I cannot stay underwater for 10 seconds. Imagine lifting weights for 30 seconds." So when someone is starting, knowing that they cannot hold their breath for more than 10 seconds, how do you make people progress on that?
So initially, we start off with like a circle of trust, and in that circle of trust, we lay out our expectations of for the session. Each session has at least one win that everybody can come away with, and the entire session is just about winning. Even if it's a small win or if it's a major one, like doing an underwater crossover for 25 meters or 50, or maybe just holding your breath for 11 seconds when back then, like you said, you could only do 10. So starting again with that begin with the end in mind, like my goal is to do this. And later on at the end of the session, we revisit that with everybody and making sure like, hey, did you meet your goal? No. What do you think happened? Could we have helped? Okay, these are some things as an instructor to keep in mind for next time for that person, and kind of helping them through that. So as somebody who's like your example, holding their breath for 10 seconds, everything is scalable with deep end. Our workouts, sure, they look intense, but that's kind of the sexy stuff you see in the gram, so kind of like jiu-jitsu, like
Hmm.
you have somebody coming in and what do they want to do? They want to learn the arm bar, they want to learn the rear naked choke, or how to like do a double leg takedown or something, so and then obviously you're going to post that sexy stuff online,
Yeah.
so right, and bring in people, and not to say that that stuff is just for show. Everything has a purpose. It just looks the coolest. Whether as someone holding their breath for 10 seconds may not be, like wow, super cool, because they don't know each other, and someone could be like, oh, I could do more. Egos get involved, but there's always scalability. So to answer your question, we have a beginner session. At least in Houston, we have beginners, intermediate, and our advanced sessions throughout the week. And so we like to start people off in the beginning, beginner session, get a history of their swim history, and then see where they're at as far as like breath holds. And everything is methodical. We don't just throw somebody in the water and expect them to hold their breath for a minute. We can do like tables to scale it, and kind of see where they're at. And then we teach them mechanisms, like maybe they can't hold their breath because their anxiety's going. It's a new place. It's a new pool. They maybe had some trauma or traumatic event from, being in the water back in junior high or something, floating the river. And so we want to take all those away, bring the elements of safety in, and show them like, hey, this is scalable. There's no egos here. You know what I mean? Like, this is for you. You can either RX it, push it to the max, or if you want to utilize today as a recovery day, then that's perfectly fine. So the goals are perfectly aligned with everybody.
Yeah.
Everything's scalable.
I know that this question you're probably not gonna have a precise answer, but in average, based on your experience, how long it takes for someone to start on the beginner class and go all the way to advance? I mean, in average, right? Because each person will behave differently. But
Of course,
what's the average you think?
average from what I've seen, we've had people come in that they could at least float, right? If you can at least float, we can definitely get some progress in. If we have issues just floating, and like the basic survivability, like treading for 10 minutes is what we do for the first session or part of our deep end fitness screener in our beginners portion. If you can't do that, it might take a little longer, you know what I mean? But
Hmm.
if you can at least float, then man, I've seen, we had a SWIT candidate that was going to that pipeline, and he went from not being able to swim, could float, to swimming a 300 or a 500 in like 8 minutes, which is really good for the PST for the military, in 2 months, 3 months.
Wow.
And he coming every Friday, Saturday sessions. You know what I mean? Like we don't have it every day, unfortunately. We're trying to get to that point, but man, yeah, he made progress. Like in at least 3 months, yeah, you're gonna be bobbing, you're gonna be doing all the cool stuff. You know what I mean?
Do you have any type of warm up or training above the ground, or you go straight to the pool? Everything is in the pool.
No, so man, we develop a lot of hybrid athletes, right? So we do have some stuff on the pool deck. We do kind of running through. You want me to run you through kind of like how our
Yeah,
session
yeah, yep,
looks?
yep, please.
Yeah. So at the beginning, say it's like an hour long session. One of our intermediate or our beginners or intermediates, and even our advanced, it all kind of starts the same. We do our safety brief, our circle of trust. We establish our intentions. We make sure everybody understands, hey, you're safe. We got you. Everybody's buddy. We care about you. Care about your growth in as an athlete or as a human being in general. And then we push on to do either breath work. So we teach them, if they're fairly new, like beginners, we teach them how to up and down regulate. So we jack them up, is what we call them, and we get that heart rate going. So we'll do some, not, and it's not, none of this is like Wim Hof breathing, right? Like we try to stay away from that. So it's just getting that heart rate elevated, kind of simulating a workout. And then when their heart rate is going, we're like, okay, now we're going to teach you how to like down regulate, bring that down. So we'll breathe in, show them how to do the 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out, always elongating that exhale, and showing them like, oh, wow, like I have the gas pedal and the brake to my, like heart rate and everything that's going on. And I can like use this, not just for deep end, but as a CEO or an entrepreneur or whatever stressors come in life, an argument with, your significant other, things that you could utilize that breathing. That's all done on the outside of the pool deck. We might throw in some CO2 tolerance in there as well. So maybe like expelling all our air and then walking for a set distance of time with that negative breath hold. And just kind of pushing, doing other things with CO2 tolerance, or we could do a lot of that in the pool. So we like to mix it up with our breathing and stuff. Workouts, we have stuff we do outside of the water, but primarily, obviously, it's called deep end fitness. So we are in the deep end and in the pool for a very long period of time compared to like how long the session is. So, but it varies, and that's the little things that vary: or safety brief, circle of trust, stuff like that.
Breathing is such a overlooked thing and so important, right? And, do you feel any difference in how this breathing, because of the water, help you, for example, in a sport like jiu-jitsu, where you have to really deep correctly breathe in order to save energy, in order to last more rounds and things like that? Because I notice, in myself included, I have really bad breathing habits that I can easily gas out really fast, just
Right.
because of my breathing. So I'm still working on that. So how did you see any improvements yourself?
Oh man, absolutely. And like I said, Lauren Murphy, UFC fighter, one of the top 10, super badass, woman and amazing business partner. She started noticing trends with like a lot of fighters that were, in a like Dominic Cruz and a couple different ones that were starting to utilize water training or deep end fitness. I think John Jones even started doing some sort of like water like training. And I knew for my own sake, for my own self, like seeing it with jujitsu, I tend to like hold my breath a lot when I'm rolling, So I hold my breath, trying to do like a pass, and you do the athleticism aspect of it, and I would tank myself, just gas myself out. But for the most part, having that and utilizing it was that being able to like regulate down, or even just the capacity of like being able to work with my breath held, storing up that CO2, muscles are burning, I need to breathe. And whenever I breathe, I'm just usually not that gassed out. I try to pay more attention to it,
Yeah.
right? Especially jiu-jitsu, but But whenever I am holding my breath, I notice that, oh, wow, okay, next thing. When usually I would probably pause, take a break, lay on them a little bit. I'm a little bit more active. I'm recovering better. My rounds, especially in the gym, I can just push them back and forth, especially whenever I'm the ergo student in a deep end fitness session. Like I want to get a workout in and we're covered with all the instructors, and I'm just booking it through, So, man, that's CO2 tolerance and that breath hold, lung capacity, and being able to sit with that CO2 in your body. It really does show. It shows, and there's no better way to do that than in real time in the pool, surrounded by an element that kind of forces you to have that engineered stress on your body.
How long it takes a deep ending fitness workout? 1 hour?
So the session, our beginners is an hour, our intermediate is an hour, and then our advanced is 2 hours.
Whoa, 2 hours! Wow.
Yeah. So that one is, we definitely try to recommend our candidates who are going to any sort of like spec war program or pipeline, our high level athletes, our fighters, our athletes that do other sports. You know what I mean? To come out to the advanced, because that's where you're going to learn a lot of the proof of concept. We do skills in there as well. So it's not just like workout. Like you're not just going in there and it's going to be like, hey, swim and don't stop swimming, right? So we do a lot of breaks, a lot of water breaks, and we do a lot of skill development. Like, hey, today we're going to work on our side stroke technique. This is the method of instruction, execute, everybody does it. We scale it up slowly, little by little, and we utilize a good amount of that time for breathing, the skills portion, a little bit more of like a skill or a SOCOM screener, a little adjunct, and then after that we do the WOD. And then the WOD can be anywhere from we've done like 7-minute WODs. That's just full intense, like get after it, as many rounds as you can. And then we've had like 15, 20-minute WODs. We have to do a certain set of rounds within that time frame or whatever, and towards the end, that eats up another like 30, 45 minutes is what I like to call the proof of concept, which is underwater torpedo league that we play at the very end. And that's where you bring in everything, where you bring in the stress, the heart rate, the underwater crossovers, the breath hold, the CO2 tolerance, all of that, and being able to score, being a part of a team, and being able to kind of like, okay, I'm not freaking out, I'm down here.
Mm-hmm.
And you can really see people grow through that as well. So that's like a full little breakdown of our sessions.
And the temperature for the water is warm, or you also do it in a cold water?
That's the age-old question, right? So for our advanced in Pear, because we have two locations, we have Pearland and downtown right now. Pearland is where we have our advanced. That's the only way we have it is there. Chilly, no, it's a little chilly, but the cold will make you come out on top for sure. And it's not like drastically cold. You'll shiver a little bit.
Well, it's
But
like
if you're looking
what,
for a
50, 60? What you say it is?
I don't know. I've got no idea. I know it is chilly, and I know it's something that we've had a lot of our instructors and people kind of like say, like, man, it's cold. It's hot. I'm looking forward to it. It's cold, But man, you grow, and once you're done with it, you're like, okay, cool. Like, what's next in today's agenda? After you're done with a session in the morning, it's a nice little. Not so much cold as like a cold plunge, but it's probably in like maybe the 70s, maybe I want to say. But our downtown pool, that's heated for sure.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's good. That's good. You started this business last year or this year?
We started it last year. Last year in February is when we kind of like came together and agreed like, hey, we're going to partner up. Let's see what we need to have. Let's have that conversation with Don and Prime and move forward. And then in June, I want to say, is whenever we officially launched.
Okay. And how you've seen the growth of the business? Are people really interested in joining this, and how is the business evolving?
Every day's involvement or evolving. Usually we like to get a lot of feedback from our students. At the beginning, we were only running, I think, 2 sessions, like one I think it was like 2 advanced at like the very beginning, like on Friday and Saturday. And then we started kind of getting some feedback. And so, utilizing that feedback, we scaled and went for beginners for an hour because some people couldn't stay for 2 hours. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, that makes sense. So, let's give them the option for a 2 hour session, and let's give them an option for an hour. And for those ones that are an hour, let's do one beginners. Let's focus on like building foundations for people who want to like do the skills and do the more intense workouts, and start kind of like grabbing and pulling people from the beginner portions to the advanced to the intermediate sessions.
Do you also
But it's going.
do you also see fluctuation as far as the season? Do you believe that summer is way more crowded than winter, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. What is it? I don't know if it's a saying or maybe I just heard it somewhere in like a dream, but the cold makes a coward of us all, you know? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if that's an actual saying, but yeah. So I'm fairly sure with like the seasonal depression and the cold and being comfy and being, nice and full belly and, eating a solid breakfast and, not wanting to go out the holidays, etc. But we've had people that come out and consistently get it, but we do see a little bit of a lull in the colder periods. And then obviously when the spring, summer hits, yeah, sun's out, guns out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very interesting. The videos that I saw, of course, is the main highlights, but it looks really interesting. That's why I was fascinated because the video was actually kind of an advertisement for Navy SEALs type of training. So I'm not sure exactly if it matched with your training because the guys were going there with the hands behind, lock up and everything. So it was way more professional, I believe. But they did it, right? They were there during a long period of time. Is that really what the SEALs they use that this system of training?
Yeah, so there's a screener called the SOCOM screener for special operations units like SEALs, Recon, Marine Raiders. I think the Green Berets and all of those guys use it as well. I'm not too well versed in like Army special operations, but yeah, the SOCOM screener that's essentially how it starts. So we do. It was a 5 minute of continuous bobs without a mask for 5 minutes, hands tied. I mean, you have like a rope and you just kind of like tie
Mm-hmm.
it, in the back, but your feet are tied, so you have to like sit there, tie your own feet together, and you go down. You do that for 5 minutes, fighting your own head, fighting the water going in your nose, not trying to freak out. And then after that, you'll float for 2 minutes, finish the float, and then you'll do what's called like a travel. So you'll travel like about a distance of 100 meters. So do a couple laps around the pool with your hands and feet tied. And everybody, like I like to say, everybody has like a superpower, and that's why it's so amazing to kind of see, especially if you've done it before, you understand. But maybe your listeners and viewers can kind of understand it after this podcast. Is everyone has their own superpower, and when you're doing the SOCOM screener or even deep end fitness, there's a superpower that's going to come out. So for some, it's that they float, like they cannot do a bob to save their life with a full tank of air. But there's guys who are just really dense, full breath of air, and then they'll go down straight to the bottom with a full tank, and they're crushing bobs left and right, no stress. But when it comes time to float, when it comes time to travel, that's when they're like struggling really hard. Whereas the person who can float and has that superpower is just floating around doing their thing, but they got to let out a little more air to do some bobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do that for 100 meters. Once you're done with that, you'll do a couple bobs, front flip, back flip, underwater. Again, hands tied, everything tied. Do some more bobs. They'll throw the mask in, and you'll do a couple bobs with the mask in your mouth. So you go down, grab the mask, go up and down, finish out with a couple bobs, and then you're done. Sounds easier said than done.
Yes.
For sure.
One.
But yeah, that is the actual training that occurs.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
What would you say for someone that is kind of hesitant to try because of they are afraid of trying, fear, right? So how you deal with fear,
How do I personally deal with fear, or what
or
do I
your
tell?
students, how you help your students to deal with fear?
Yeah, I scale it. Either I demonstrate that I myself was in that position at one point. I didn't start off as a fish, and I had to learn it and kind of conquer that myself. But I try to show like that's everything is scalable, the scalability portion of it. Like maybe there's a fear of doing a bob without a mask or a mass retrieval, because that's part of like the deep end fitness screener is a mass retrieval from 12 feet minimum. And some people can't do it. And so I don't try to like make them feel bad or anything. It's like, hey, look, okay, cool. Just do a bob with your mask on and then clap above you to get down to the bottom. Once you reach like a little tippy toe, that's a win. You know what I mean? Just tippy toe down. You can touch with the fat finger, little big toe, come up, you won. Now, next session, or maybe in that same session, we'll do, okay, now same thing, but now try to stay down there for like 2 seconds, you know, and we just scale everything. Everything is just so scalable that the fear is more of getting off the couch and coming in, to be honest. Once you're there, I've seen people realize, and they've been able to tell me and Lauren as well, like their comfortability level and their water confidence goes high. That's our job as instructors, is to instill that in people. And especially when they're in, if they have a fear, to communicate it, and we can work and guide them through that. Maybe they need privates, which we do that as well.
Do you, not do you actually, the question is how many structures do you have per session? Because I would imagine that one instructor will be very busy to a large group of people, right?
For sure. Yeah, of course. So right now we have 4 instructors. Usually we have about 2 instructors per session, sometimes 3. One in the water as like an in-water safety, and then one outside of the pool deck as like the head instructor leading the session. Excuse me. And but for the added safety sake, and I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, like you have everybody else who's your buddy in the buddy system, right? And we say that in our safety brief, like, hey, we operate under the buddy system. Everybody has the responsibility for each other to look out. If you notice something off, say something, do something, bring one of us over. Myself and Lauren, we're all instructor certified or lifeguard certified as well. So we know the rescues, and they teach you that in the instructor course as well. So yeah, we have about a good amount of instructors, but if we're lacking and maybe it's just me on the pool deck, then I know I can lean on certain ambassadors as well who have taken that, level or class, or that show proficiency, that I can lean on a little bit more and be like, hey, can you help me out? Just kind of keep an eye on this person, and keep an eye on the pool. But everybody has that level of safety and full field of view in the pool.
Diego, this is amazing. Congratulations for the work that you've been doing. I think that this is really helping people to overcome fear, overcome situations that, because if you think about, they can carry on all those behaviors that they learn on the system to other areas of their life. So this is a very important set of abilities to have, regardless if they are going to use in the water or outside of the water. So amazing work there. If we want to find more information, I believe that the website is deepfitness.com, right?
Yeah. So obviously we operate under like an affiliate program. So we have the deependfitness.com website. If you want to find an area near you, I know not everybody that listens to your podcast is in Texas or in Houston. So go on there to find like your nearest location. For myself, it is, or for us, like Deep End Fitness Houston is defhtx.com. And you'll find like all the merch and things on there. And then obviously our Instagram handle is Deep End Fitness HTX. And you'll be able to find a bunch of cool little videos and reach out, ask the questions. Again, I manage it. I manage the social media, right? Because of the added history of my entrepreneurial history. So yeah, super pumped to hear from people. If they need anything, just reach out. I would love to talk to them.
Awesome, Diego. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Of course, you already know. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. This is a wrap for today's episode. Stay tuned. More things to come.